Hey horror fans, welcome back to another episode of Week in Horror. We're closing out the month of June with a look back at June 28th through July 4th. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Eugene, and with me always is JL and Alex.
How's it going, everybody?
What's happening?
Now, I think we have a couple of announcements, correct?
You could say announcements.
As far as announcements go, I am sad to say that tonight we will not be having a special guest with us.
Wait, what?
It's a bummer. This whole situation going on out there, the COVID-19 thing, is just playing Mary Hob with everybody's schedules. So we will be doing something different tonight. And I don't want to spoil it. It's something new that we're going to try, but that's going to be available to our patrons. You can check that out. Hopefully you'll like it. It's just something new that we're going to have fun with. So that's a special thing that's going out to our patrons here. And 1 month later, it's going to go out to everybody else. So hopefully that'll be fun. And we do, speaking of patrons, we do have a new patron. So we'd like to give a huge shout out to our new patron, NANA.
Yes, thank you so much.
Welcome aboard.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much. He joins the Slasher tier. We really appreciate it. So he will be getting early access to our bonus content.
Hell yeah.
So I wanted to check with you guys. Did you hear about this horror movie that was shot on Zoom?
Only very recently.
Yeah, only a little bit about it. I did read an article about it, though.
This is so freaking weird. So just for our listeners, if you have not heard about it, a group of filmmakers got together and used the Zoom chat program to film a horror movie with a budget of $0. And basically, to give kind of a breakdown, 5 YouTubers join a video conferencing call before their chat is interrupted by a disturbing figure. Now, the movie's only half an hour long, and each actor volunteered to work for no fee. And you can rent the movie on Vimeo. Well, apparently this motherfucker, with zero budget, just a bunch of people on Zoom, this fucker topped the box office.
How do you do that if the theaters are closed?
I'm so glad you asked.
That wasn't staged at all.
So apparently there's this tactic called four-walling. And four-walling is when a distributor will rent out a movie theater and they buy all the seats. So they pay a flat fee to the theater itself, and any money that they make off those seats goes straight into their pockets. So they pretty much buy out the theater, and if anybody comes to watch it, then the money, whatever profit they make goes directly back to the distributors themselves. And so they did this, but there was no one there. So they pretty much rented out a screening that nobody saw, but thanks to that, it made the equivalent of about $25,000 on June 10th. And because of that, because no movies had been released, boom, they hit the top of the box office. So a movie with zero budget, a horror movie with zero budget, made solely on Zoom, topped the box office on June 10th. You can check out those numbers via Box Office Mojo. But, yeah, your move, Chris Nolan.
See what the fuck
With your $200 million original movie that's supposed to come out.
So that is fucking wild. It is awesome that filmmakers out there are getting so creative during this, during this whole situation. Things are getting insane. As all of our listeners know, we're currently here in Texas. Things are really insane here in Texas as of right now.
And only getting worse.
Our governor...
only getting worse.
And only getting worse. Our governor is not one of the smartest cats in the world. That's about all I'll say about Abbott. But he made some really, really bad choices, and now we're paying the penalty for it.
It's like the fucking OK Corral down here. If you're listening from outside of Texas, I recently traveled to the United States. Y'all are doing it right. All y'all's curves are going down, even through our fucking ridiculous 5,000 new cases a day bullshit. You guys are doing it right. Stay at home. Don't wear your mask. Just stand fucking 6. Just keep doing what you're doing. Texas is just absolutely bonkers. You can go anywhere, be as close as fuck you want to anybody, and then our numbers go up, and the governor's like, "What happened?" Like, okay.
Yeah, like Abbott released that statement. It was like, "These numbers are too damn high," and I'm like, "You stupid motherfucker! What did you expect?"
Like, of course, everybody's getting drunk, and now they're all out there touching each other, and fuck.
Well, it's fucking crazy. I myself, I've discovered I was exposed by a coworker. He didn't know he was sick, and eventually he came down with it. He got tested. He came up positive, and I actually worked in close proximity with him for a while. So my company was worried about me, so they sent me home. So I am actually currently I'm literally on COVID quarantine. So when you get officially quarantined by the company I work for, you end up quarantined for 2 weeks. Unless you get a notification from the doctor that you are negative. Now, I have been tested. I got tested last Thursday. The problem is, all these giant cases, this ramp up of cases, and the fact that the federal government, that Trump shut down funding to many testing centers. So there aren't that many left here in Texas that are actually, testing regularly. So that has caused a massive backup, which means my test, which is probably negative, is stuck in some fucking database somewhere, and I have yet to find out if I'm negative. I can't go back to work until I get that notification. So here I am, stuck at home. Well, I guess I can work on the podcast.
If you're going to be home anyway.
Exactly.
But it has been. It's been super insane here, and so everybody just be safe, be cautious. It's still out there. I've known people who have passed from it, so it's definitely something to take seriously.
Yeah, there's a lot going around, and I've mentioned this before. My whole family works in the medical field, and I run into people on a daily basis that are like, from, it's really not that big of a deal to it's straight up fake. And it's like, I've had to console loved ones that work in this field that have watched 30-year-olds stroke out, watched healthy 40-year-olds suffocate to death. Somebody in my life recently had to watch this happen in real time because they could not tube this person fast enough. And so it was just like, it's the horror stories that you hear from it have turned me into like, because at first I was like, okay, cool, it's just mind your business, stay away from people, wash your hands. But now it's come down to you need to be taking actual preventative actions, especially if you're in Texas, because I'm not kidding, we've had 3,000 plus new cases. I know people are like, oh, blah blah blah. No, my sister works in a lab. They're processing this many cases, and it's like they're all getting processed in real time. It's maybe a day or two behind, but it's like there's so many people. That's why you said you think your shit got lost. It's probably backlogged so fucking far because they are trying so hard to get all these. People are just dropping like flies. Our age people, if we get it, our risk is just fucking major vein stroke. Like, not even normal, like, left or right side stroke, like, straight up main vein fucking stroke. And that's, like, younger people. Older people are dying of pneumonia. Little kids are getting it, and they're having major complications. And it's like, come on. Just be part of the solution. We've got enough problems.
Yeah. It's wild, not to mention all the other chaos that's out there. It truly has become a horror show outside your door.
Insane.
So, fortunately, you're here listening to Week in Horror, which is an entertaining horror show, at least. At least we try to entertain. We try
Can't catch that shit through the mic. Can you?
So, yes, as we practice social distancing, you can listen to us chatter on about horror movies, which is what we're here to do. So, I don't think we have anything else. Alex?
Not a whole lot for me. Just out here, just enjoying the shit show.
That's your cue to say your line.
What? Whose line? Whose line is it anyway?
Your line.
Anyways.
Aren't you looking at the script?
Yeah. You just said my name like I was supposed to say something after that.
Yeah, I was cueing you to say your line before Eugene takes the first movie.
Let's get this party started. Eugene is going to kick us off for the
week. Why do I write these fucking things? I swear
when
to
you
God.
learn something, I don't think we have anything else for the week. Alex, like, oh, do I have anything else for the week? And then I was like, no, I don't think so. And then you dropped the line and it got awkward, and this is like fucking junior prom all over again.
I didn't know what to do. Should I just go or wait, or I don't know what to do with my hands?
what do I do? just keep him down. Just keep him down. Just keep him down. Yes. Let's get this party started. Eugene is going to kick us off this week.
That's what I said.
What do we have first? Yes, I am going to salvage this shit, Alex.
I already said it, asshole.
I fucking wrote the line. It's going to be said.
All I want to do is talk about the low-budget horror movie. All right, so
let's get this party started. All right, sorry. Go ahead.
So all three of us are going to fucking say it. No, that's fun.
Post. This is going to be a good post.
It is. It's going to be a good post. So starting off, released June 28th, 1957, we have the movie Unearthly. And it was directed by Boris Petrov and is starring John Carradine, Myron Healy, Allison Hayes, Sally Todd, and Tor Johnson.
Ooh, my man, Tor
Johnson. Love some Tor Johnson. And just in a quick nutshell, it's about a mad scientist that seeks immortality with a trial and error gland and experiment with and his servant Lobo. So they basically start experimenting with a new gland for the human body.
Ooh.
And
I love old school 50s horror because the premises were so simple. You know, evil scientist tries to do this, does this thing, and it's scary. Or it tries to be scary. I love the simplicity of 50s horror. I really, really do.
And so do I, because it's straightforward. It's straightforward, like, hey, this is what our film's about, and then they just go at it.
It's so much fun, and one thing I really dug the most about the Unearthly is, not to mention, I black and white horror films from the 50s and the 60s are just, they're close to my heart because they were so simple, and it was a time when filmmakers really had to stretch their imaginations in order to get their stories done, because obviously special effects were not, they didn't have the money for huge special effects. They made use of what they were able to get their hands on. And particularly, I wanted to kind of put a spotlight on the legendary Tor Johnson. Now, in these types of films, it was perfect for who Tor Johnson for the kind of guy that Tor Johnson was. For anybody who doesn't know, this man, legend of these types of movies, big, we worked with Ed Wood a lot, but Tor Johnson was a Swedish professional wrestler and then became an actor. And this cat was, if I remember correctly, how big was this dude? 440 pounds.
He's a big motherfucker.
At his heaviest, and I think he was how fucking tall was he? I think he was like 6'4" or 6'5".
Oh, maybe something like that. I mean, he was a big guy.
You can see it in the movie. He's just like, when he picks people up, like it's just like nothing to him.
Oh, and it's awesome to see it, to watch him. Because, I mean, he towers over everybody, and he always did the whole, like, homunculus, kind of like, like that, because he was Lobo in this one and in other movies. Because I know that Ed Wood utilized him a lot. But some of the films that he did that people might remember him from, Man on the Flying Trapeze, he was Toss-Off in that. In Kid Millions, he was Torture. He always had these one name, or these one-word names. Mm-hmm. He was the Mauler in Gentleman Jim, Mug in Ghost Catchers. Those are the kind of guy he was. But very, 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 very simplistic. They never gave him too much because he was literally just the epitome of the heavy, of the big minion in black and white films. And he worked so much. I think he worked from 1934 all the way to 1984.
Damn,
yeah.
Yep. And Plan 9 from Outer Space was towards the end of his career. So obviously one of the worst films that ever made. But Plan 9 from Outer Space, The Beast of Yucca Flats, which I think we actually talked, we actually That's actually, I think that showed up in that was in our Daily Splatter last year. And his last film was in '84. Was Night of the Ghouls, where he played a character by the name of Lobo again. But yeah, just any of the movies that he's been in, whether it was comedy or sci-fi or horror, he was always he's so unique and got to kind of spread his wings as an actor a bit. Not as huge. He didn't become as huge as, say, like Andre the Giant for his size like that. But if you watch any of these kinds of movies, anything that came out of the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, any of these black and white style, really cheapy horror films, you'll recognize him. He's the biggest motherfucker out there. And I kind of wanted to shine a little spotlight for him because nobody ever talks about Tor Johnson because he was so fucking cool. I mean, he brought what he could to it. He's just fun to watch.
God, you talk about him, you just mentioned a couple movies that I haven't even thought about in a long time, coming out of like the 50s and the 60s, but like mostly the 50s. And you mentioned Ed Wood, Plan 9 from Outer Space. We can just push that one off to the side. But known for stuff like Glen or Glenda was one of his earlier films, and then Bride of the Monster was another one that I actually saw pretty recently.
Oh fuck yeah!
I forgot about Bride of the Monster.
And then it goes all the way up into stuff like Orgy of the Dead and Necromania and stuff when he started getting into the sexploitation stuff.
You see, and despite all of that, everybody he worked with said that he was just the sweetest, friendliest guy.
He was a dude. Tim Burton made a movie about him with Johnny Depp in it. Playing Wood. I think it was called Nightmare of Ecstasy, The Life and Art of Edward D. Wood Jr. And yeah, it's just like a biopic of his life. And so if you watch that, you can really get a feel for the kind of person he was. Obviously Johnny Depp plays an awesome role in that movie. But, you get in this low budget 50s horror, which is... it's got to be kind of my favorite because it comes kind of after, you get introduced to all these monsters and you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. So they do stuff like Bride of the Monster or like The Son of Dr. Jekyll, Mother Riley meets vampires. So you get all these like spin-offs of, Abbott and Costello meet the Mummy.
I fucking love these titles.
I know, it's great because it's always like, they started just going off on this fucking crazy whim, and these people are just like, oh, I got an idea, let's knock it out. As low-budget films, you can just knock these things out. You don't have to worry about the money so much, and you get your ideas out there on film. And, the 50s was huge. You got, like, Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Blob. The Blob came out towards the end of the 50s, but all the way up until then, you've got these cult classics that we watch over and over again now. They might not have been great then, but, they live to this day. Like The Blob, it's something that if you ask anybody, they're going to know what that is. But then you get stuff like, you start getting into the late 50s, which was my favorite, because they just started coming up with like Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow and the giant Gila monster. And, you get all these fucking weird titles. And then it kind of runs to the end with Plan 9 from Outer Space, which was just,
I liked it. There was a moment. It was really cool because I think that during the period of time when he was doing Ed Wood movies, and like he was a guest contestant on the quiz show You Bet Your Life, and which was hosted by Groucho Marx. And during the show, Groucho asked Tor to give him his scariest face. And so Tor did his classic, the classic thing he did in virtually every movie he does, and Marx just, comically ran off the stage in terror, and then came back and did this big over-the-top begging him, just don't make that face again. So that was the dude's legend. And given individuals like Lugosi and names are not coming to mind, like Bela Lugosi and give me someone else, guys. I'm brain farting.
Charles Lamont.
Frankenstein. Boris Karloff, like Karloff and Lugosi, and the other individual who played the big names in Universal horror, like that. Unfortunately, Tor never got to break into like major, huge films, so he didn't get to be. I don't think he never got to see the acclaim that I think he deserved for how awesome he was to work with, how just how much he brought to it, and how much everybody loved him. He was just a staple of the low budget independent horror that was of that time. Maybe that's what fit him. I wish he had broken in and gotten much bigger. The best we have is Alex. You mentioned he was portrayed. He was portrayed by George the Animal in Tim Burton's Ed Wood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. God, I was looking up stuff on that specific movie just to it won 2 Academy Awards. It was a good movie.
It was a really good movie. What we're seeing is we're starting to see the first amount of independent films. It's almost kind of like a proto-independent, the low budget, because in the 30s and 40s, you didn't have indie films or low-budget films. They're just not there. I was like, studios basically had everything and every say. And you're actually starting to get, first of all, cameras getting a little bit cheaper because everything at this time is still shot on film.
Advent of technology.
But the advent of technology, when you had cameras in the 30s, the cameras in the 30s, like good quality film cameras, were like half the size of a car. And it was a huge box, and it was loud, and you had to put it on a crane to move it at that time. And now you're starting to get decent quality small shoulder mounted cameras, and so now you're starting to get filmmakers like Ed Wood that kind of started taking off and go, let me make something about it. And one of the things that's always been a staple of horror is horror doesn't have to be big budget, and you can shoot it with no names. No, if you film a drama, most people won't see it unless it has some kind of name that they recognize on it. But horror has never been that case. So this is where Ed Wood is kind of starting to take out, and you got Tor Johnson who was able to utilize this, and this is kind of led into Night of the Living Dead, which led into the slasher movies and low budget horror movies that we come to love today.
Individuals being able to take control of their ideas and take control of the scripts that they got their hands on, because at the time that Ed was coming out, studio, you had a handful of major studios that were controlling everything. You had MGM, you had Universal. What was the? I don't know if RKO was still around, but just a small group of studio heads, and then actors were typically contracted to those studios for a certain amount of film. So you sign on with the studio, you could only do movies for that studio, and then you could not go anywhere else. So it was like Warner Brothers and RKO and MGM and Universal. I think there was 5 or 6. But then all of a sudden, technology improves. People started making smaller cameras, and people start going out and doing their own stuff. Now, arguably, they don't have studio money, but they are able to make movies. So when you will start being able to do that, everybody wants to be an actor at that time. Everybody in California did. So you could get anybody in there. You could find people that didn't have the draw and put them in there. And you're right. It gives rise to, we wouldn't have Lloyd Kaufman and his style of horror if it wasn't for, this kind of thing. And that's one of the benefits that we've seen of technology become nowadays. Like we said, we have a horror film being shot on Zoom, and apparently deemed successful in that respect. Found footage deals where the camera's literally set in one point, and then it, like Paranormal Activity or the Blair Witch Project. So we can thank that Ed Wood style and 1940s, 1950s low-budget horror for kind of opening up the world of filmmaking to so many people when it used to be so inclusive.
It really did. And also, at that time, directors were fired all the time. It was common for a film to have 5 or 6 directors, and then whoever was kind of like the last man for 5 years, one would get hired on, fired, hire another one, fired. That was very, very common. That was how Victor Fleming was able to direct Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind in the same year. Because he was just brought on at the very end, shot 2 scenes, and he got credit for it. And whoever was the last director, sometimes directors coming in just in the editing phase, they get credit as a director. So taking somebody like Ed Wood, who they want to control their project, they want to have the final say on it. And independent filmmaking at this point, it was trial by fire, trying to figure it out. A lot of Hollywood secrets were secrets at the time on how they did stuff. And so sometimes you look at Plan 9 from outer space and go, oh, well, there's some bad effects, and they use some stock footage, and the sets look really cheap. But at the same time, Ed Wood didn't have a YouTube tutorial that he could watch to figure out how to build a good set.
I mean, he could have done something a little different than just like turn a light on in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And you work with what you've got, because eventually these guys low budget, they start with low budget science fiction, like Ed Wood started low budget science fiction. I think he had some of his Plan 9 from Outer Space, Night of the Ghouls, the really weird one, Glen or Glenda, back in 1953. But then eventually like most of the directors of this time would then move into sexploitation as that ramped up in the 60s. And eventually sexploitation leads to pretty much softcore pornography, which went in there. But it definitely was a turning point for the entirety of the industry. And I would say the beginning of the end of studio control, which was an epic time, which pretty much allowed anybody. It pretty much was the first time anybody said, you can make a movie too. And it's probably not going to be great, but you can do it as long as you get your stuff together. And I think there was kind of a mentality shift in Hollywood at the time where people were starting to kind of, given some of the shit that went down with some of the big names, like some of the shit that Boris Karloff went through and Bela Lugosi went through, because there was contractual nightmares. People got stuck in movies that they didn't want to do, or the movies that they knew were going to be duds. With This Way, there was kind of a pushback, and then actors and filmmakers, anybody behind the camera, realized they could push back against the studio, and it wasn't going to be the end of their career.
And I mean, that's awesome. And it's weird because they call that age the golden age of Hollywood, but at the same time, it was all studios, and now the fact that actors can work and get projects they want to do, and filmmakers have a much better chance of getting out there, because if your product's good, your product's good. I mean, it's just bottom line. If it's good, people will want to go see it. And you take Sam Raimi, Evil Dead would have never been made through a major studio.
Never. Yeah, never. Just given the content, no way.
No way. No, it never would have. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, none of those would have ever been made through MGM. But the advent of technology and everything, and we get those today, and we get to enjoy them.
And now look, Disney's buying everything.
Now it's going back.
Don't remind me.
Now it's going back to Disney. Of course, then Disney will take a no-name director and have him direct Thor. So, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if 2020 ended with Walt Disney, like a mecha Walt Disney showing up. This world is mine.
They put his frozen head in the robot.
Oh yeah, please do.
Oh yeah, I love that meme. That's like Black Mirror season 6 has really outdone itself, having us experience the season instead of watching it.
Fuck, I didn't even think of that, man. It's all just part of the simulation. Have you guys noticed the sky looks kind of weird every day now? It's all a simulation, man.
But anyways, going back to it, and so we've talked about several 50s horror films. What is your favorite 50s horror film? I know we talked a little bit about Unearthly. We've also talked about some nuclear horror a couple episodes ago, like Them. But let us know in the comments, what is your favorite 50s horror movie? And JL, what do we got next?
Ooh, we're gonna go super fucking weird.
Yeah.
You don't say.
And I actually had to rewatch this one because I hadn't seen it in a long time. But we're going J-horror. So released July 1st, 1989. We have Tetsuo, the Iron Man. So this probably not a lot of our listeners have watched this one, but I'll give a quick breakdown. So directed, produced, and written by Shinya Tsukamoto, and starring Tomororo Taguchi, Kai Fujiwara, and Shinya Tsukamoto. So Japanese names. I'm fucking dying here. So to summarize this extraordinarily grotesque and weird movie, The film follows a character known as a salaryman, which was a staple of kind of like the identity of Japan at the time in the 70s and the 80s. The film follows a salaryman who accidentally, while banging his girlfriend in a car, commits a hit and run and kills the character known as the metal fetishist. And his girlfriend and him dump the body and try to get it and basically think that they've got away with the crime. And then all of a sudden, the salaryman starts sprouting metal from his body and turning into the Iron Man. And eventually it's really fucked up. And eventually the metal fetishist returns, and the two of them engage in a climactic battle, and shit just goes fucking sideways from there. So I had to watch it twice, actually, because I watched it the first time. I didn't remember a lot of it, and I went back and I watched it 2 more times. And the director, Tsukamoto, we could definitely say he was. We can definitely see his inspirations here.
Can we?
Well, yeah, there was definitely inspiration. You can definitely see an inspiration from Cronenberg. Heavy inspiration from Cronenberg, and heavy inspiration from the ideologies of Japan at the time, and kind of how he viewed where life was going. And this was he'd actually I'm going to keep messing up his name. Tsukamoto had actually directed several films before this,
and after.
But this was his kind of biggest film at the time. And at the time that he made this, his personal life had kind of collapsed. He was kicked out of his house by his parents. He had quit his job at an ad firm. So he had no money coming in. He had no home. And this film took like a year and a half to make, because they didn't get to work on it all at once. So technically, all told, it took about 4 months to shoot, but that 4 months was spread out over a year and a half. And this movie almost broke the director, because if this movie was not going to be successful, he would have absolutely failed as a filmmaker, and he would not have had a career.
But hey,
it exploded. Exactly. It kind of exploded out there, and people were like, what the fuck? Put his name on the map. But we can definitely see his inspirations from Cronenberg in the body horror aspect of Tetsuo.
Can I just ask a question? What is it? I'm not trying to be like, this is an honest question. What is it with Japanese, I guess you could say Japanese body horror, body fetishes, and just fucking penises everywhere all the time? There is a huge difference, because when we started talking about this movie, we started talking about body horror and Cronenberg. Like, I understand the inspiration comes from that, but the difference between The Fly and this movie, now, looking at body horror in the United States, it's a lot of stuff like disease and zombies and transformations, and then you get into Japan, and it's always like the most outlandish, like tentacle monsters, fucking eyes on random parts of the body. It's so anime. Like, you can tell that like the movies that they try to make in real life all stem from like some sort of artwork, manga, anime, like some sort of just outlandish cartoon that they're like, we could fucking make this in real life. And then you end up with like the fucking Iron Man, which like we discussed at the end of the movie, when they come together and he's walking down the street, looks like a giant penis. There's tentacles all over. It's just cocks. Like, and then you got the ever famous drill penis. And it just, the difference between, you say there's like, you can definitely see like a Cronenberg influence in the body horror aspect, but they take it so much farther in these Japanese movies. And after watching this one, I looked up some clips from some other Japanese body horror movies, and it's all so intense. It's so far off, like,
off the reservation.
Any sort of like normal, like, okay, The Fly, he turns into a giant fly. Or like, zombies and stuff where there's like mutations and like werewolves. And then you get over there and it's like, you get 57 tentacles, 4 eyes. I don't care really where you put them. You're going to have metal coming out of everywhere. And, that makes some of it look like dicks.
It's the fact that it actually fully works. It's not just like a metal dick that is there. It is a drill, and it is fully functional.
It's ready to fucking go.
It is ready to drill you.
His fucking girlfriend kills herself on it.
Yeah.
It's fucking wild. So an interesting thing that was brought up to me is, and our friend Cody, who's a friend on the kind of behind the scenes friend of To the Week in Horror.
What's up, Cody?
We had a conversation one time, kind of talking about the differences between Japan's ideology when it comes to entertainment.
Is this a hentai discussion?
Our ideology. No, not a hentai discussion. But what he saw, because he's a huge anime and manga fan. He loves Japanese, pretty much anything. He's a big fan of J-horror, big fan of J-pop.
Fucking love it.
And one thing that he brought up, because we talked about this one time, to see if I can put what he said in a nutshell, is that post World War II, or say pre World War II, Japan had a very unique and very singular identity about itself. About pretty much what the country felt about itself. It was very nationalistic, and national pride was very, very high, and it was deeply rooted in tradition.
That shit went straight to their heads.
And then after World War II, when Japan officially surrendered, it seemed to be, and I'm totally speaking, I'm not a historian, but what it seemed to be is that after the bombs dropped and Japan surrendered, they officially surrendered. Because the Japanese at the time, they did not surrender. They either died in combat or they won. That was it. And suicide was always preferable to surrender. So when Japan officially surrendered after America bombed them, it kind of broke the country's spirit. And they lost their identity when that happened because Japan doesn't surrender. And then all of a sudden, they've surrendered. And so as a nation, they didn't know what to do. And then all of a sudden, it happened so quickly. They get hit. They hit Pearl Harbor. We respond. We hit them with the bombs. And then they surrender. And then all of a sudden, we're back in there helping them rebuild.
Now they're confused.
Because America is not about, because despite America's failings, America has always done one thing very, very well, is that when we go in there and mess shit up, after the dust settles, we will help people rebuild, either through, cash infusions, or we send our people over there and we assist the country in rebuilding. We don't just leave them to their own devices. We weren't going to bomb someone back to the Stone Age and just let them sit there. So America helped them rebuild, but this meant an influx of American influence into the rebuilding of Japan. And so a great amount of Western influence suddenly found itself the Japanese people suddenly found themselves kind of neck deep in Western influence. And you still had a great amount of the country that was still nationalistic and still kind of in tradition, but so many Japanese died at that time that it literally created a gap in their generational
There's
gap.
A huge generational gap, yeah.
Exactly. And then the new generation that came up was coming up post World War II with all this American influence kind of competing against against the tradition of their elders. And out of that kind of, I don't want to say insanity, but out of the confusion of that was born their entertainment today. So I've always attributed that American horror is very much like a very well-colored picture, and Japanese horror is very much coloring outside the lines.
So what you're saying, sorry, this might be dark. So what you're saying is we wouldn't have had Pokemon if we didn't have Pearl Harbor?
Maybe
we could say possibly. We could say that a lot of their entertainment is definitely based in that kind of, it comes out of that confusion, because there was a decided difference in pre World War II Japanese entertainment and then post World War II Japanese entertainment. Post World War II gave us the kaiju movement. Okay, so we had the kaiju genre, where we had that was literally the effects of nuclear power influencing Japanese ideologies as when it came to what was pertinent at the time. Now we have atomic monsters going around. We wouldn't have Godzilla if it wasn't for what we did in World War II. But there was a decided, because the Japanese ideology when it comes to, or the Japanese mentality when it comes to sex is very repressed, or was very repressed, as it is for America. Because America, we come from puritanical foundations, and Japan, because of their society and their traditionalist society, their kind of view of sex was also very repressed. But post World War II, that exploded because they realized, wow, Americans aren't like this. Why do we have to be the way we were? And it just kind of, but with no puritanical roots, it just kind of exploded. So now it's all extreme, or extreme by our American eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Solid history corner with JL over here.
I had because I have always wondered that myself. Because Japanese horror, Japanese anime,
it's so fucking
things
out
that they
there.
focus
They were
on,
so
they
repressed.
giant monsters, giant robots, and really weird, freaky sex shit.
So much weird, freaky sex shit.
There you go. So it's born out of the confusion of having American influence rebuilding another country's traditionalist society. That influence really, really messed them up.
So they tried to fuck us up, but then we ended up fucking them up.
It's such a terrible term to say messed them up, but that was the best way that Cody could put it. It was the best way we could articulate it, is that we had a profound, weird influence on Japan. And everything we see nowadays is kind of born out of that. So, U.S. body horror is all about what I was able to discern is that United States body horror, stuff like out of Cronenberg, is very much about losing control of basically our body doing something we don't want it to do. There's a separation between the consciousness of the mind and the body itself. When the body starts doing shit, but we retain our consciousness, that's our body horror. I'm sick and I'm mutating, but I'm still me, and I'm mutating all over the place like the Fly. That's our body horror. But in Japan, it's all about the person expressing their body all over the place.
Literally.
They're in control. Yeah, they're in control, but they themselves are going out, or their bodies are going out of control, and they're going with it. It's a loss of both body and of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen Akira?
Yes, like Akira.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. So that's what came to mind. Like when I started doing research into this whole thing, that was one thing that popped up. I was like, oh yeah, that one. That was a big thing. That was you said you've seen it. It's biker gang, dystopian. It's actually set in 2019, which is kind of funny because, pretty much.
It's wild.
Yeah, they pictured a different world at the time.
Yeah.
and one thing I really, really dug, going back and watching Tetsuo again, was I loved the fact that he shot in black and white. Number one, because it is cheaper. It's cheaper to shoot in black and white. That's exactly the same thing that Kevin Smith did. Kevin Smith shot Clerks, and it was cheaper to shoot black and white. And he had no intention of making, it's kind of artsy. That's the way people is like, oh, yeah, you shot black and white. That makes it very artistic. And Kevin Smith was like, sure, it's artistic.
If that's how you fucking see it, that's how it is.
Exactly. But obviously, I don't want to mispronounce his name. Tsukamoto shot this thing in black and white, I think for two reasons. One, because yes, it was cheaper, and two, it gave an aesthetic to the film that emphasized the grime, the gore, and everything looked fucking filthy in it. Like it was you were caught, no matter where you're at, whether you were in the apartment or you were outside in the town or wherever you were in, everything felt like an abandoned machine shop.
Yeah.
So there was like a film, like a greasy film all over everything because we shoot in black and white. Eugene, it's something to do with the way black and white film captures light, right?
Yeah, so black and white, it doesn't have like kind of any kind of a color grade on it at all. But one of the things that black and white leads to is due to your exposure, you can basically hide little bits and pieces and things that are actually in plain sight because you can underexpose a little bits of it. And some of the creepiest images I've ever seen in my entire life are black and white. because it's that you can make out lines, but there are a lot of images. It's like you can't really make them out what it is, or it takes a second. Like you say, you see a face in the background, but when you click an image, it pops up. Oh, the face is right there. But when you looking at an image for a while, and then all of a sudden you realize the face is there, that's what's creepy about that. That's really what it is. And so it gives this grime kind of feel, because it does have like some cyberpunk like roots to it,
and everything was wet.
Yeah.
Like every person in that thing was sweating their ass off.
Why is everything wet?
Why is that?
It was weird.
It had some weird moments, but one of the things that I will do a shout out to him is the fact, first of all, he got it done, and this is somebody who when we talk about no budget. We've talked about no budget films before, but when I mean no budget, this is bottom of the line, like 3 people doing everything, because what he ended up having to do was he did everything himself. The machine parts on him and stuff were from discarded TVs that he found and broke those pieces off and literally taped him to his body.
Yeah, and there was one thing that always caught me during the production there, because the production was so spread out. There were times when he wasn't able to, when he actually would go and he would work with other people. So he would assist other directors on their projects. And then while, like, there was, I can't remember the name of the director, but he assisted one other director, and he assisted a director in doing like 80 shots of their movie, of that director's movie. But during that 80 shots, he was able to shoot 1 shot of his own movie.
Yeah.
So he constantly just scrabbling to try and find a moment when he could get a little bit more of his done, which resulted in people dropping out, people coming back in, and absolute chaos behind the scenes. But yeah, props to him for fucking getting it done.
Hell yeah. And something I wanted to mention too, I'm sorry I'm kind of jumping back, but we're talking about like the Japanese style movies, was in this movie there was like, I guess I got a feel for, I brought up anime, I was going to tie it into this movie because there's a lot of shots in this movie that you could tell he was just trying to get shots. So like you got like the fast moving scenes, like there was one that stuck out in my head was like, they were going down a hallway. It was just like fluorescent light bulbs, like quickly, and then like a room, and then it was just like something that stuck out. It was like very anime like, and they like.
You mean like when it was kind of strobing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it was like they were like
it was
just
very much like stop motion.
Yeah, and that's they used
a
lot of stop motion in this movie, which I found interesting because I was watching some behind the scenes stuff on it, and they did use a lot of stop motion when they were building, like when the Iron Man was, at points in the transformation and stuff, and then like that strobing, like the one that, like I said, stuck out was like it was going down a hallway and it was like fluorescent light bulb, fluorescent light, just repeatedly over and over again, and it was like, this is like an anime when it's like moving really fast down a hall, and then I don't know, it was kind of cool that they like worked in very traditional type Japanese style into this like cyberpunk horror movie. Like all around it was like a total shit show. The whole thing took forever, and like you said, people dropped out, came back in, some people were in it and they're never in it again, and it was just a mess. But it ended up like at the end of it was so worth it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to touch on, because we don't see it often in horror film, and that's one thing I love about Japanese horror is Japanese horror directors willing to go into profound psychological territories or profound concepts of humanity that are not normally touched on in American cinema. And Tsukamoto heavily, we're mentioning cyberpunk and everything, but that is an aspect of transhumanism that Tsukamoto was going after. And I thought him going after that, or him, I would say commentating on the transhumanist movement. And for those of our listeners who are not familiar with it, transhumanism is kind of the idea that humans and machines will eventually blend together to become kind of either a new species or a new organism in the future, and that is how we will progress as a species. Or post-humanism is sometimes what it's called. And
like Siren
whereas
Head.
this movie, yeah, and this movie was more, and Tetsuo and the two that came after it, because there was actually a trilogy, Tetsuo 2 Body Hammer and Tetsuo the Bullet Man. And all three of them are kind of like an observational look at the idea that technology will rip us apart as we are now, but then invariably bring us together again as a society in a new form. And that was kind of his look at it, and it was heavily inspired by the Japanese economic collapse. Because right after this movie came out, their economy was beginning to tank, and they suffered a kind of a real estate bust, much like we did in 2008, and it just decimated the Japanese economy. And so that's where the idea of the salaryman died. The guy that is, he's married to his job. He's more loyal to the company than he is to anything else. And it was high stress. It was overtime hours all the time. And it's what typically led to all those the spate of Japanese employee suicides that people heard about. We always thought that was so weird. That was kind of that loyalist mentality that was informed by the capitalistic notions of America. That was one of the things where those melded. And
that stems back from like the death before dishonor type thing. It just goes into a more modern corporate situation.
Exactly, yeah. So it was wild, but I love the fact that he went there. We don't see a lot of American cinema go in that direction, especially so extreme. So if you have the stomach for it, listeners, definitely check out Tetsuo the Iron Man. This is our first real look at a J horror film, because we've looked at the American remakes of The Grudge and The Ring and stuff like that, but this is legit J horror, like Japanese horror. Definitely go and look at it if you've got the stomach for it. There is some weird fucking shit in there. But that brings up, I want to know, for those who have seen it, for all of our listeners who have actually seen Tsukamoto's films, what is your favorite in the trilogy? Is it the Iron Man? Is it Body Hammer? Or is it the Bullet Man?
The Bullet Man. That was the American, or I guess the English version, right?
No, it was shot in Japan, but it was English language.
It was in English. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But definitely, let us know which one is your favorite. Hit us up. Let us know, weekinhorror@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think. And moving on, Alex, you've got a creepy one too.
I was just, for some reason, I guess the first one was American, but the rest of these movies are all kind of other country movies, huh?
It happens like that.
I know, yeah. It's been kind of a theme.
It's not intentional.
No, not at all. But so moving on, July 2nd, 2015, we were blessed with a movie called Goodnight Mommy. This movie was... All right, I'll get into that in a minute. Written and directed by Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala, if I'm pronouncing those correctly. Starred Susan Woost, Elias Schwartz, Lucas Schwartz, Hans Eicher, Alfred Schatz, Carl Perker. You can tell that I'm not super European. George Dolovsky. These are all Austrian names. Sorry, not totally European. But anyway, so this movie was psychological horror from Austria, and it was... There's so much going on in this movie, it's hard to nail down a plot. But if we were going to... two boys, their mom comes home from a plastic surgery, all bandaged up in the face, and the boys start to suspect that the mom might not actually be the mom, is how this movie starts out. But this movie takes so many twists and turns. And honestly, listeners, this is something, if you were going to respond to something, please email. I would love to have conversations about what you took away from this movie, because there are so many different directions that you could look at this movie. These 9-year-old twins are trying to figure out what's going on with their mom, who they think is not really their mom, but there's so much more going on. And I can't spoil it because this is a fairly new movie, and I really, really want to get the audience's take on this. Email us, weekinhorror@gmail.com. I want to have a full-blown discussion because at the end of this movie, I had way more questions than when I started. And none of them are answered, but it is done so fucking artistically that it's like I'm not even mad that I can't pin it down because I've got like 6 different theories about what actually happened in this movie. So we can get into it as much. I really don't want to I don't want to give away because there's 2 really big plot twists in this movie, 2 of them. And so, yeah, I would love to really hear what's going on in this. These kids, I mean, you get into the creepy kid aspect, you get the whole psychological background behind the mom, behind the sons, like there's so much going on here. And I'm so glad that you brought this movie to my attention, JL, because I never would have found this on my own.
Yeah, there's a quality to it. It is definitely like you said, it is very artistically shot. It's actually a very beautiful film. I really enjoyed it from a visual perspective. And of course the slow burn terror that just builds because it's a very slow build.
It's very slow. But
the uncertainty of it, it's just magnificently well shot.
Yeah, it definitely is. And this is I honestly believe we are seeing a birth of a new genre of horror films, because we've talked about like intelligent horror, and that's the slow burn, because you didn't really see stuff like this like 10 years ago. You still had like slashers and torture porn that was still going on and big, and now things have really slowed down and they focused on the tension more. And it's almost like when you look at like say torture porn, for example, the big thing is the kill. How gory, how messed up, how painful could it be? And it was always about the payoff of it. And now people are going, okay, well, the payoff is great and all, but you can only do a payoff to a limit. But the build up to the payoff, you can do indefinitely.
It's seriously, and like the first half of this movie is like all psychological. Like you're gathering questions, you're gathering information, you're like, okay, this could be this could be that. And then the second half of the movie goes into like, it completely turns everything around, and it does get kind of gory, but that's not like the focus of it. The focus is all in the heads of the characters.
And it's the fact now we're seeing how cinematography can play with how we perceive different characters, because
oh god, yes, yeah,
yeah, because you look back at horror, bad guys are shot a certain way, good people are shot a certain way, and every once in a while you get a little red herring like in Scream or something like, oh, that person dropped the cell phone, they can be guilty or something like that. But typically good, bad, they're shot different ways, so that way the audience can tell them apart. And now we're starting to get horror films where it's like, well, we shot everybody like we shot a villain.
What if everybody's the bad guy?
Yeah, what if, okay, so we have these kids, and naturally, you're like, okay, well, these are kids, and actually you want to root for the kids, but maybe we shoot them like they're villains. Have the kids kind of do a couple of bad things. Well, they do some bad stuff, but also the kids do some bad things, and now it's like okay, is she telling the truth? Is she lying? So you have an unreliable narrative to begin with. Everybody looks bad on top of it, and then you amp it up with just this tension.
Yeah, it was very, very difficult to ascertain from whose perspective are we supposed to be seeing the film. In that, because there were times when it felt like we were seeing it from the kids' perspective and the way they were taking in information, the way they were processing information, and then there were times when we get it from the mother's perspective. It's kind of like how is she taking all this in? And then there's times when you are the kind of the God perspective where you're outside of it, you're the audience and you're watching it, so you're beyond the fourth wall. And the way it plays, because the transitions between these were seamless. Oh, yeah. And I credit that to a very, very strong sense of framing and how every single scene was framed specifically to derive for emotional impact.
It had
moments when the mother's tied up and when she's been tied down to the bed, or when the kids are, when the kids were at the church trying to explain what the hell was going on, and the priest is just not grasping it.
The priest is like, "What the fuck? I'm taking you home." What the fuck is wrong with you?
And, without giving away too much of the scenes, but the way that they were crafted, this just goes to show the technical mastery that even in the horror genre, which we don't often attribute to like extreme technical mastery, but if you bring that to it, very much like Hereditary, okay. That if you go with those beats, don't just go with the spectacle, but if you actually put people behind the camera that know how to create an image, or know how to to frame a shot, or know just how long the camera needs to linger on a moment. Okay, when you put that mentality behind it, you can churn out some of the most terrifying shit you've ever seen.
So I'm real big into stuff like that, about watching like behind the characters and camera shots like that. Something I noticed in this one is this is why I say like this could go a million different ways in your head, and I think it's supposed to. You're supposed to come up with your own conclusions. But there's a shot, and I won't give too much away, but there's a shot where the kid lights the aquarium on fire. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, if you watch that shot, in the background of that shot, there's a picture on the wall. And the way that they frame him with the picture is like, and I don't know if it was completely intentional. And like I said, I'm not going to give a lot away. But the picture is of like, almost like a shadow type figure. The way that they like line it lines up with the movie. And if you watch throughout the whole movie, if you go back and watch behind all the characters, there's little clues. But a lot of them are like, You don't know if they're misleading. You don't know if it's like if it plays into the story. Just the way that they like you said, they frame every shot so artistically, but it's with a purpose. And so like that aquarium scene behind the boy, and it's like, wait a second, okay, so, and then you start thinking about it, but then you'll see something like, the pictures of her pre-surgery on the wall, like, okay, well then maybe it's not what I was thinking, but then it wraps around, and the whole time the camera work is telling a story on its own outside of this already complicated storyline that you've got going on. But it's not so complicated that it's like, okay, this is hard to follow. It's very easy to follow, but there's so many different clues in the backgrounds of the shots that you get to like piece the story together yourself, which is just fantastic.
One thing that you mentioned, because it was that there's so much going on and there's so many little hints and details all over the place, it can be difficult to ascertain exactly what is taking place because, like Eugene said, it's completely unreliable. But I looked into it, and the inspiration behind this movie, and there have been several like it. We've seen movies like this, with The Good Son, with Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood. A Tale of Two Sisters, the American remake of that one, The Uninvited. There was a movie in 1972 called The Other.
Yes.
Which is very similar to this, but all of these stem back to what I found was a Korean folktale, which is really, really cool. And for anybody who wants to go and look into this and actually read all the details on it, I can kind of nutshell it here. So the story is called, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. I do not speak Korean, but I'm going to try. It is Jeonghwa Hongreon Jeon. And if I pronounce that correctly, it literally translates as the story of Jeonghwa and Hongron. I think it's Hongron. I think it's how I may be totally fucking that up. But it's a Joseon era Korean folktale that is about two daughters whose mother died. And then the father marries another woman who is this evil stepmother, and she hates the daughters. And eventually, the stepmother has three children with the dad, and she has like three more boys. And so now she has more power in the household because she now has three kids, and she has three sons. And so she then goes about trying to exact kind of like the murder of, or getting rid of the daughters because she hates the two girls. Invariably tragedy commences, it's very, very grotesque because these things often get very, very visceral in Korean folktales. But then the daughters come back and exact their revenge, and it's really, really wild. So I don't want to give too much away if anybody wants to read about it. It's really, really neat. It's pretty bloody and grotesque. There's like miscarriages and drownings and all kinds of, suicide and all kinds of crazy shit. But
we can put the spelling on our show notes on the YouTube channel too.
Yeah,
I can put it on there.
It's wildly, and it's just very. I love the horror films that we come across that take their inspiration from folktales from so long ago. Like we talked about the other one about the Snow Woman, the inspiration that Japanese story that kind of inspired several horror films. So you never know. For all you filmmakers out there, look back into the past. Look back into the kind of folk stories of not only Japan but also Korea, Vietnam, China, obviously England, anything out of the UK. The old folk tales can inspire some great modern stuff because the weirdness and the twists and the turns are definitely seen here in Goodnight Mommy. And I don't want to give too much away. I actually do understand what's going on, Alex. I understand what's happening. I could probably tell you after the show.
We're definitely going to talk about it because like I get what the actual. Okay, so like I guess without giving too much away, we can say like, all right, so like the very last shot of the movie, when they I'll just say fourth wall, and it's like, okay, that's where like everything kind of clicked together for me. I get what's going on, I get what they were going for, but I've also got some like little things that I want to pick apart with you. We'll talk about that later. But definitely, if you want to jump in on that conversation, audience, seriously, get with us. We'll start like a little email thread if we can to kind of get everybody involved because I'd love to hear some of the theories because there's a lot of stuff that I'm sure you won't notice until you go through and pick it apart. But
very
hit us up in the comments. Yeah, you can definitely fire it up in the comments, and we always respond. So hit us up there.
And then I guess since we're talking to the audience already, I'd like to know also what the most terrifying part of this movie was for you. Because like we said, there wasn't a whole lot of like gore and murder, but there was enough going on that different parts of that movie could hit you differently if you're in different parts of your life. You could be going through a tragedy and part of the movie could hit that. You could have kids and that could, really touch. So like, let us know. What was the most terrifying moment for you guys in this movie? Because there was a few, for sure.
Oh, that cockroach scene still gives me the shivers. But the super glue on the floor thing.
Oh my god,
that fucked me up. I was like, that's not right.
The one, and out of all of that stuff, I can't say this. The one thing that made me go ooh was when she goes running out the door and the tripwire's there.
Yeah,
I was like, that was the one. That was where I cringed real hard because it's like, fuck, that sound of a face hitting concrete was like, oh my god, that was terrifying.
And you kind of feel bad for her at that moment too.
At that point, yeah,
she gets up, and
but you still don't know how to feel about it. Like, it's confusing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of folktales, Eugene's gonna kick us off with the last movie, or I guess end it with our last movie.
All right. And this is a fantastic flick, and it was released June 3rd, 2019, so just last year, and it's called Midsommar.
July 3rd.
Yeah, July. Yeah, I said July 3rd. Yeah, July 3rd, 2019.
What did he say?
June.
Oh, damn it. So July 3rd, July 3rd, 2019, we have Midsommar, and it stars Florence Pugh. Okay, thank you. Florence Pugh, Jack Raynor, William Jackson Harper, and Will Poulter.
You should have given Eugene the Japanese one.
And directed by Ari Aster, who obviously he directed Hereditary, so this is his sophomore effort on it. And basically, in a real quick nutshell, you have you have a couple when they have a few friends with them too, and they travel to Sweden to visit their friend's rural hometown and attend the Midsummer Festival. And they basically get involved in this pagan cult, and as they're there, it starts becoming increasingly violent and bizarre as they go on with their rituals with hallucinations and stuff like that. When we were talking about cinematography with Goodnight Mommy, this is another film that is well executed with cinematography.
Oh, it was wonderfully shot. I've always been a big fan of just, like of vista shots. I like shots of the country, big, long, lingering shots on, just kind of the outdoors like that. Wolf Creek is a favorite of mine, just because, it was one of the first. I think Wolf Creek was one of the first films to really utilize the super high def, where it was shot completely in high def, and those long, sprawling shots of the Australian outback. Just, I love stuff like that, and I love these ones of the bright, sunny fields and kind of just the outdoors of. I think they were in Sweden or Norway.
It takes place in Sweden.
Sweden.
Yeah.
So it's just the gorgeous vistas of Sweden, and I love framing that in this almost idyllic setting, of which this horror this subversive horror kind of bubbles out of. Very slowly, and it was just the whole notion of, the subversive horror of Midsommar, which I think divided a lot of audiences. You got to dig the fact that it's a beautiful landscape, beautiful country. Everybody at the beginning all of the people that you meet in Sweden, they're all super, super friendly. Everyone is there to enjoy themselves. It's a positive. It seems like a very, very positive environment, and it's broad daylight the entire time, super bright and sunny. Everything's happy, but this is a goddamn horror movie. It is a serious fucking horror film, and it descends into an absolute nightmare. Really, really slow. And I know the story itself was kind of born out of Ari Aster went through a very difficult breakup in his personal life, which is what is the kind of grounding, which is kind of like the foundational element of the film itself was the character Danny, Florence Pugh's character, her kind of like tumultuous relationship with her boyfriend and the traumas that they brought in. But the film was so subversive because you don't see that the hits coming until they land right on your chin.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you walk into a room and see a fucking blood eagle.
Exactly. Yes. Or, hey, wear my bear suit.
Oh my god.
Oh.
You're talking about it. I mean, you mentioned the breakup thing, and like, you get to the end of this movie, and you're like, man, I really wish that what's his face would have just broken up with Danny. Christian would have just broken up with Danny. She wouldn't have had to go through all this shit. Because it's seriously, like you said, they come out of nowhere, and like watching this movie, and they start going on the trip. I mean, obviously Danny has like that stupid traumatic, I'm pretty sure everybody's seen this, but with her sister and her family, and the sister fucking,
yeah, that was just fucking brutal.
That was rough. And it starts off and she's already in a rough state, and she's like, fuck yeah, let's go on this trip, or finds out about it after they tried to hide it from her, and then goes on this trip, and everything's like, she's already got bad vibes from the beginning, and then they do the mushrooms. And something I wanted to point out when you even mentioned this movie was, like, they eat these mushrooms. There's very few movies where they like portray like how being on mushrooms feels correctly. And like you said, with this vista shot of the outdoors and the sun, and they really do a good job at like making you feel like you're tripping when you don't have to be, which is cool, because then it goes into this thing, and then it's one thing after another, and this poor girl is just getting beat down over and over again, to a point where you get towards the end and she's just kind of like dragging along, because it's like you go through so many things, from the fucking cliff scene to finding a leg in the flower bed, and then the blood eagle thing, and it's just like, how much can one person take before they completely just descend? And this movie really does a very good job at like just following that descent into madness, and then obviously like over and over again they're getting drugged, and then she ends up like, you know, becoming the queen of the May, the whatever, the little dance thing.
The May Queen, because she won the Maypole contest.
Yeah, and so like they see her slipping, so then they put her in this role, and then she's like, oh, okay, this is great, and there's just so much going. It's like, do you think that you would react any differently going through that kind of stuff, seeing that kind of stuff happen around you? I mean, I don't blame her for falling in like that, but like, you know, it's situations like that where you can really develop a character, and they did such a good job on it, just using that trauma to just show, and she plays that so well. And I forget her actor name, Florence Pugh.
Florence Pugh, yeah,
just fantastic at portraying like that poor girl. I feel so bad for her, you know. And it's like, I know it's a character, I know it's a movie, but like I genuinely felt bad for that character, watching all these things that she had to go through the whole movie. And
it was one thing that her baggage, the thing that she brought with her.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing that I have always noticed about horror storytelling, and is that the majority of characters, the majority of your primary characters that basically fill a horror story, are generally identified or generally defined by the baggage they bring in, by the traumas that they bring with them into the story. Because the first part of Midsommar, like the opening, when we meet all our primary characters, the colors are very, very dark. Mm-hmm. And obviously Florence, Danny goes through the trauma of her sister murdering her entire family by poisoning them with carbon monoxide,
with gas,
and the difficulties with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend's that dude was a fucking douche. The shit going on with her boyfriend, and then it's such a switch, and then they go to Sweden and it's bright and happy and beautiful. But every single one of the characters has their own baggage that is so distinctly defined, being brought into this, and it informs their choices. It informs what the characters do when they engage with the cultists. And I've noticed that is a common trope amongst all horror, is like this. And one thing I loved about Florence Pugh is that she brought more to it other than just the lingering trauma, whereas all the other characters pretty much defined by by the baggage they brought with them. But because the story is hers, so she was able to bring a little bit more. And not just the fact that she suffers from panic attacks, the fact that she is dealing with the trauma of the loss of her family, her unstable relationship with her boyfriend, the uncertainty of feeling like she doesn't really, like nobody really wants her there. And so she's dealing with all this shit alone. Yeah. And how she processes that, and how the cult invariably ends up assisting her in processing that trauma. Either, probably not in the best of ways. This girl would probably, if we were to continue the story, the girl would probably be really, really fucked up after this.
The last fucking scene where she goes from crying to laughing, you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, she's broken. Yeah, she broke.
She's gone.
But I've realized that is a common element in storytelling, is the lingering traumas or the baggage that characters bring with them, and it's a common thing amongst horror. And I wish there were more that I guess when you're trying to sell a story on the kind of stuff that you see here, especially the stuff, the Blood Eagle and the disemboweled bear and the craziness and what was the name of that fucking that ritual where the elders jumped off the cliff?
Oh, right at the beginning. The
Atustupa?
Atustupa, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. So, and when you see stuff like that obviously makes up the horror film, but it's just one thing that gets me. And I can't, and I'm hard-pressed to think of another horror film, or of any other horror film, that really goes further than that, where we see a person descending into horror from a normal life, and their baggage is not with them. We always see the baggage and the trauma making it pretty much defining the character itself. Any ideas on that, or?
I don't know, because usually it's they either have some trauma or something like that, or it's the effect of what's happening, and they start making decisions like based off of that. Because like the movie I'm thinking of is because I was trying to think of like a character, like who's the main character that doesn't have any trauma in a horror film. And so I started thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I started thinking of Cabin in the Woods with the main girl, because I didn't know if she had any trauma or like that before the story of
No,
Cabin.
She was having the affair with her professor.
She was.
Oh, yeah, she was, wasn't she?
At the very beginning, she was having this affair with the professor. She didn't know where it was going anywhere, and she felt like she couldn't decide whether he really had feelings for her or whether she was being used.
Okay,
then
it's something. It's something that comes in. One thing about horror is horror has always talked about kind of the human condition in it, and horror started off as a way of. It actually started off as a way of talking about the nobility without actually talking about the nobility. And so obviously times have changed, and so now it's kind of turned back in on itself, because now we're going to talk about trauma, we're going to talk about the human condition in the not after school special style of it. It's good. It has something to say about the human condition, because with this movie here, it's easy to look at the cult and go, why would somebody join this? Who you turn a certain age and you die? You jump off a cliff? Like, why would anybody like sign up for that? And then you see everything that she's been through, and as she's getting deeper, deeper until the very end, and the takeaway I had of it is like, okay, I can see it now. Why would somebody go into a cult like that? Because they're broken and they need something. They need something to help them process it, and that's what the cult did. And now she's there.
So the trauma then invariably becomes a justification for her grabbing onto pretty much the last rung that she could grab onto, which is what the cult was offering.
Yeah.
At that point, you're totally broken down. And I really don't mean any disrespect, but like it's almost like the military. Like you go in and they break you all the way down and build you back up to be a certain way. And so like you say, you know, why would anybody do that? It's like, you know, there is a reason behind it. Like you said, the trauma, you know, you don't know how to go on. You don't know where to go. You deal with your whole family dying. You're having problems in your relationship. You're now in this place where you've watched death all around you. You've almost become desensitized to it, drugged over and over again. And you just get to a point of compliance. It's not even like a willing compliance either. It's just you've given up completely, and now you will take the first thing that comes along to rebuild you, and you'll become that. And, you know, I've been through traumas in my life where you get to a point where it's like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I'm going to lay here until something happens because I'm completely broken right now. And, you know, fortunately, I sought help in those situations at the very last, you know, second. But I could see, I've been in the shoes of somebody that you could be influenced by anything on the outside at that point in time. You're just so broken down. And honestly, for people that aren't very strong-willed, it could happen very quickly with very little outside influence. And so it's like you see this type of movie and it's like it's totally whack job, but also this kind of thing happens. There are death cults, there are sacrificial cults that have many, many members.
And when you brought up when you were talking about the military, it actually reminded me of one of my favorite scenes. And you have the movie's Officer and a Gentleman, and yeah, you have the rom-com ending, Kevin Factory, and all this other kind of stuff. But the absolute best scene in that movie, you have Richard Gere, who's like, I am the confident one. I can breeze through this officer training and all this other kind of stuff. And at the very end, he gets in a boxing match with his drill instructor, Luke Garrett Jr. And they start fighting off. They're fighting back and forth, and his drill instructor wins. And his drill instructor is, why are you here? And throughout the movie, he's given all these, I can do this, and do this. And when he finally broke Richard Gere at that moment, Luke Garrison was like, why are you here? And he's like, I have nowhere else to go. Yeah. And it's that moment. It strips away everything else, and then this is what you have. And this is what this movie did. It broke her. It descended her into madness to the point where she accepted it. And one thing I wanted to point out about this movie that I really enjoyed, we talk about in terms of it taking place during the daylight, and it's so many bright colors. I've noticed when I was watching it, it made the darker moments more horrific to me. And I don't know.
It did, because nothing was hidden. There was nothing left to, I would say nothing left to the imagination.
No, you expect scary shit in the dark too. You expect stuff to be scary when it's dark, but then you don't expect, like, it's bright and sunshiny. I want to feel good. The sun makes me feel good, but there are people fucking literally falling off of cliffs around me.
It really does, because it's just back and forth imagery, because they're wearing white and they have these flower headdresses and they're so nice, and it can turn on a dime, like we talk about with Goodnight Mommy, how it's that slow burn tension. It's the clank up a roller coaster that movie focuses on. Whereas with Midsommar, it has a little bit of elements of like that, but this is where it can turn on a dime. You can, instead of being, the lights are off in the house and everything is super dark and the characters are going through, this is bright daylight and it can turn on a dime.
So we can legitimately say that the horror genre does offer an opportunity for catharsis in its audience, and in kind of an expulsion of the traumas that not as extreme in the movie that we're watching, but an expulsion of the traumas that we feel, the little traumas that kind of build up within us. And we get a kind of catharsis in seeing, either in identifying with a character going through these things or identifying with a situation that's beyond our control. I think a wonderful kind of bookend movie to this would be The Babadook.
I can see that.
Because if you look at how that was shot, with its grays, with its undertones, with the darkness, with the shadows of that, and the grief and the trauma and the things hiding in the darkness, and how the things that you don't reconcile, the things that you don't come to grips with, can come back, and the things that you deny can come back and harm you, can hurt you, and do real harm. Whereas in Midsommar, we see a girl going through the same things, trauma and grief, and desperate to find some kind of life preserver in the ocean of her own personal dilemmas. And then she finds this, and then of course it's bright and it's sunny, and even then, when the horror is right out there in front of you, the cards are all on the table, and no one is hiding anything. And then you still get that kind of catharsis. In either way, I think just from a visual perspective and from an emotional perspective, the two films kind of bookend each other, which is kind of neat. So maybe that could make a good double viewing for some of our audiences.
That really could. Kind of how to deal with grief.
Yeah.
Yeah, just how people deal with grief. Don't deal with grief in that way, obviously, but don't try to.
This is how you should deal with grief. Here's some mushrooms and a murder cult.
I'll deal with my grief with that mushroom tea. Oh.
Now, God, it always brings me back to the movie fucking Shrooms. That one left a fucking mark on my psyche for sure.
So now we talked about how this was Ari Aster's second film. Mm-hmm. I've noticed though with this one and also with Hereditary that a lot of people are very decisive on it. They love it or they hate it. I mean, how did y'all feel about it?
Oh, I fucking love this movie.
I had an issue with it at first because I heard so many bad things, and I never ever listened to critics or anything. I always like to do stuff on my own, and I didn't actually watch this one because it had so many bad reviews. And then I finally sat down and watched it, and I kicked myself so hard because I absolutely loved it in the end, all the way down to that last scene where it was like they ended it perfectly. It was great. I loved it. That's one that I would definitely watch multiple times.
I did. I love it because I know a couple people who didn't, and obviously reviews were kind of mixed, and some critics did pan it. But this is something. If you're a horror fan, obviously, it's just one of the must-see movies. And this is actually what I want to ask the audience: how did you feel about watching Midsommar? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let us know in the comments below. Shoot us an email how you felt about it, and definitely let us know.
Awesome.
All right. We actually got a one in memoriam and one happy birthday. JL, go ahead and take us off.
Yes, we do have one in memoriam. We are remembering the great Ray Harryhausen. Born June 29th, 1920. He sadly passed May 7th, 2013. One thing I want to tell you, there's so much we could obviously say about Ray Harryhausen. We don't have a super, ton amount of time, but we were all of us, both as filmmakers and as, just as horror fans and just, fans of just watching old movies. We were all influenced by Ray Harryhausen. For those who don't know, who might not be totally familiar with Ray Harryhausen, he was an artist, designer, visual effects creator, and was a producer, and he created a form of stop-motion model animation known as Dynamation, which is pretty cool. You can look into that. There's plenty of schools of thought on Dynamation. You can learn how to do what he did, but obviously it was the movies that he worked on that is unique, the unique vision he brought to movies for his stop-motion work. Just movies like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts, and of course, Clash of the Titans. I mean, who didn't marvel at that one? Medusa and the Kraken and, shit like that. Really, really, really cool stuff. Because virtually, I can't think of a director who was not inspired by the work of this legend.
No, huge names.
I mean, he was somebody who pushed the envelope in technology. It's people like him that get a lot of technology and the film techniques we use today because it's, hey, I need to figure out how to do this, and this was the guy who figured out how to do it, and everybody learned from it. So anybody who pushes film technology, I'm a huge fan of.
Definitely. You had directors like Spielberg, Peter Jackson, Tim Burton, James Cameron, Joe Dante, Guillermo del Toro, J.J. Abrams. You pretty much
George Lucas. Like, you could pretty much just go on forever.
You could go on forever by the people that took inspiration from him. Even I've taken inspiration from him in some of the things that I've written. Just in kind of envisioning how he approached a project and the ideas that he had. It was such a wealth of information and a wealth of knowledge in how he approached projects and how he worked it out and how he made his own system. I have to ask you guys, of the stuff that Ray Harryhausen did, of his films, what was your favorite? What was the one that had the most lasting impression upon you growing up?
The lasting impression on me was Jason and the Argonauts growing up, because I believe that's the one where they did the skeleton fighting.
Yes, the big skeleton fight.
And because I remember watching it, and I watched it with my mom when I was really little, and it was like how did they do that? Because growing up, I've always was like, okay, I always want to know how movies were made. And so watching that, and when Mom was like, oh, this was made in 1963. This isn't like CG or anything like that. This is like a bunch of techniques put together. And it fascinated me and actually got me into like that Greek culture for a while.
What about you, Alex?
I was trying to think back to probably one of the first ones that I had seen. 20 Million Miles to Earth was probably one of that probably got me introduced into his work. But it was stuff like the Sinbad character was something that I got into. The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, and like you said, Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. Those were probably ones that I sought out to watch repeatedly.
Well, Voyage of Sinbad, that was the one that had Kali in it, right?
Yeah.
Had the Kali fight? Yeah, the multiple sword fight?
The 6-armed Hindu sword fight.
The one that got me was 1 million years BC.
Okay.
Because I'm a huge dinosaur fan. I fucking love dinosaurs. I love paleontology. And the fact that he had everything. There was a brontosaurus, there was an allosaurus, triceratops, ceratosaurus, and pterodactyls, and all kinds. It was awesome as a child to see these things animated for the first time. Now, of course, we know that his models aren't exactly they're not exactly the way they were supposed to look. They were the best science could provide at the time. But seeing dinosaurs come to life in that fashion, because I saw this years before Jurassic Park came out. And Jurassic Park still gives me chills to this day. But
I can't wait for the new ones.
But getting to see dinosaurs the first time animated like that, outside of a cartoon, was just stellar to me. Just blew my mind. That had a lasting imprint. And I would like to know, our audience, what Ray Harryhausen film inspired you, either as a filmmaker or what had a lasting impact on you? I'd love the audience to get involved in this one. Let us know in the comments. How did he affect your childhood? Because I know he affected all of ours.
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely.
So definitely a rest in peace, Ray Harryhausen. If anybody has not seen his work, please go see it. It's stellar stuff, and it may just inspire the filmmaker in you. You never know, take it in new directions, but definitely a treasure trove of films to watch. And our one birthday this week, what do we got, Alex? Whose special birthday is it?
It is a very special man, Texas born. We've got William Gary Busey, born June 29th, 1944. Obviously, American actor that you've heard of, worked on Lethal Weapon, Predator 2. I think one of his first coming into a supporting role was on Thunderbolt and Lightfoot with Clint Eastwood and Jeff Bridges. By far, always has been, always will be one of my favorites of his.
Yeah, he was somebody I straight grew up with him, though. I mean, some of my favorite movies growing up were like Point Break and Lethal Weapon and Under Siege.
Oh, Lethal Weapon. He was off the fucking hook in Lethal Weapon.
Oh, he was so good He's so good at playing a bad guy. I mean, he was everywhere growing up.
Fuck, I was just thinking of Under Siege.
It's such a good movie.
It was really cool because he had such an interesting character actor, and if nobody has gotten to see the Buddy Holly story when he played Buddy Holly, definitely check that out. That came out in 1978.
Yeah, fuck yeah, dude.
Really, he was so good in that. But
with Sartain was the first big bopper.
Do what?
I said Sartain was the big bopper. That was such a good movie. That was a fucking great movie.
And the where I first saw him was Lethal Weapon, and because Lethal Weapon came out in 1987, I probably saw that when I was like 8, but first saw him in Lethal Weapon as the kind of the uber bad guy, who has that epic fucking fight scene with Mel Gibson at the end when he finishes him off with the fucking scissor hold on his neck and shit. It was great. But did anybody did anybody see him in Surviving the Game?
I did not.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, Surviving the Game was basically it had Gary Busey, it had John C. McGinley, it had Charles Dutton, F. Murray Abraham. It was basically about a bunch of elite, rich hunters who hunt homeless out in the Pacific Northwest. They hunt homeless people.
Wait, what
out
was
of the
this
Pacific
called?
Northwest. Do what?
What was this called?
Surviving the Game.
Okay.
He was fine. Okay, he would. If you haven't seen Surviving the Old, Rutger Hauer was in it too. But Rutger Hauer was like the leader of the group. But anyway, I'm just throwing out names. And Ice-T was the homeless guy they hunt in the movie. So awesome fucking movie. It's really, really sweet, and you get to see Gary Busey at his most zany, because obviously when they have the ruse, he's playing totally straight. His character's name is I think he's Doc Hawkins, and when it starts out, he's totally cool, just like just chatting, everything's going like this. But once the ruse is up, and Ice-T realizes he's being hunted by the ghost, he goes full batshit crazy.
I was gonna say, like, that's not one dude you want to be hunting down.
They picked the wrong homeless guy.
It's really cool, and I love his little stuff. Obviously, he had little turns. He had a really good turn in a Kurt Russell film called Soldier.
Oh yeah,
yeah, he was really, really good in that. But one thing I want to give credit to, he was in a Stephen King adaptation. He was in the movie Silver Bullet. Mm-hmm. And I want to highlight this one specifically. Number one, it's a horror film. It's a werewolf flick. He ad-libbed all of his lines in that movie.
Nice.
That's incredible.
So he operated... Do what?
That's incredible.
He operated no script. So everything between him and Corey Haim, him and the late Corey Haim, All of that stuff was all off the top of his head. He just he knew the character. He's like, this is the character. This is what the character's function is. Boom, I'm going for it. He got some backstory from the director. This is what it is, and he just played. And I think that right there is the mark of an actor. Is the mark of a serious actor. Even though it's pretty crazy that he did have lines in the script, but in his eyes they just didn't work. They didn't sell the character. So he pretty much ad-libbed everything and did it all himself. And he was fantastic in that. And we know that he was in an accident at one point, right?
Yeah, I thought it was like a motorcycle accident, or was it a car accident?
It was a motorcycle accident. Yeah, he was in '88. He was in a motorcycle accident in which he was not wearing a helmet.
Yeah, because he did suffer some brain damage, and he was never the same after that.
Or was he more awesome?
He definitely did not become less awesome, that's for sure.
Because that was in '88, and he'd already done, obviously he'd already done Lethal Weapon, Eye of the Tiger, Silver Bullet. He had all these great movies underneath him, and then obviously it changed. But he kept acting. He didn't stop. 1990, Predator 2.
Yeah.
I mean, that was only 2 years after his accident. And he was at Point Break, 1991.
Mm-hmm.
So it might not have been until his later years when it started catching up with him.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because he did kind of drop off after... I was trying to think of the last movie that I had seen him in.
Like the last big movie?
Like the last big movie, because I know he was in like that Piranha 3DD.
He did the Entourage movie in 2015.
Yeah, that's right.
Where he played himself. Yeah. But he's still working. I mean, I think the last film he came out the last film they had him was 2018. And
Camp Mana.
Yeah, and then he's still doing and he was on an episode of Impractical Jokers in 2018 as well. So he's still working.
He was in Ginger Dead Man. That's right.
Yes, he was the voice of Ginger Dead Man.
And
don't worry, horror fans, we will get to that movie soon.
Hell yeah, we will. Oh, he was in the last Sharknado. It's About Time.
Oh, of course he was.
Yeah, he's in 2 Sharknado movies. Because he's in Sharknado 4.
He just comes running in. He just comes running in. There's fucking sharks in the tornado, man.
I can just see him with that hair.
God.
One of my favorite in jokes was in the show Scrubs. Was whenever Elliot, the character Elliot played by Sarah Chalk, whenever her hair was messed up, she was always confused with Gary Busey. And they always managed to drop Gary Busey in one moment. It's like when they're doing a follow shot when JD and someone are talking, and as they pass, JD's like, "Hey, Elliot," and then it passes, and then it's actually Gary Busey. So. I love the fact that he's still going strong. I know that on occasion he's kind of a parody of himself, but obviously the man takes it in stride. He loves what he does, and I can't wait to see if he has anything more. I know that he is... he's 75? So, yeah, he's 75 this year. So, he's turning 75 this year, so I don't know, maybe he'll retire soon, maybe not, but I'm looking forward to seeing if he has anything else. So that is a happy birthday to Gary Busey.
Happy birthday, Gary.
Dude.
You crazy maniac.
You psycho fucking lovable motherfucker. Don't ever stop being you.
Don't ever stop being you.
Exactly. All right, well, that closes out another episode of Week in Horror.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That was just Gary Busey thoughts jumped in my head. I don't know what to tell you. So yes, thank you so much to our listeners for checking us out. We love you guys. Definitely check us out at weekinhorror.net. That's our site. You can definitely put in your email address to our monthly horror shirt giveaway. We give away a mystery horror shirt every month. You put your email address in, we will not spam you, and your name is automatically entered permanently into our mystery horror shirt giveaway every single month. So be sure and check that out. As always, feedback, comments, questions, suggestions, hate mail, send it all to weekinhorror@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys. We love hearing your suggestions. We always have new stuff coming out. And we're always taking ideas for new content. What would you like to see? We'd love to hear what you think. And if you really, really, really love what we do, you can always support us at Patreon, patreon.com/weekinhorror. Our patrons get early access to our Bloodbath debates and our After Dark sessions with our special guests. We love you guys. We try to come up with as much new stuff as we can. We want to give it to you. If you love us, you can support us at Patreon. We even have a $1 tier. We know times are tough, but only support if you can. Otherwise, your listen, your like, your share, your subscribe, it all helps. Thank you so much. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, facebook.com/weekinhorror or @weekinhorror on Twitter, and get our daily splatter, which is a little bit of horror knowledge straight to your feed every single day. Something you might not know, a movie you may not have seen. Definitely check those out. And as always, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Week in Horror. We put this show on YouTube. You can listen to it there. You can comment to us in the comments. Alex would really love to hear because he's very, very lonely. He loves having people to talk to. So definitely put those comments in there and engage with us there. As always, we love you guys. Thank you so much for listening to us. I'm JL.
I'm Alex.
I'm Eugene.
And we'll see you next week. And as always, stay scared.